What an amazing crowd. It is great to be in Wisconsin, and we're going to win Wisconsin together on November 5th. Now, I am so grateful to all of you, grateful for coming out, grateful for all the work that you've been doing on behalf of our campaign, grateful for getting your neighbors out to the polls, because we need to get every single person, everybody that we can, out to vote in November. I have a dear colleague of mine who says that we need every single person in this room to vote 10 times. And everybody gets a little nervous and said, well, Republicans don't vote 10 times. We just vote once. But the legal way that you can vote 10 times is to take yourself, 9 friends and family, and get them to the polls. And if we do that, we do it together, we're going to win this state. You know, because that's what's so amazing about the people power that animates this campaign. We're never going to have the mainstream media. We're never going to have the Democrats, allies in the press. But we have the truth, and we have the people, and we are going to win Wisconsin because of that. Those are the 2 most powerful forces in American politics. Now, before I get started here, I want to give just a couple of shout-outs here. And the first is you guys have a great state party chairman in this state. Wisconsin, I've met a lot of great state party chairmen, but I want to give a special shout-out to Brian Schimming. Brian, thank you so much for everything that you do on behalf of us in Wisconsin. We've got Wisconsin State Assembly candidate James Rolbecki. James, where you at? Give James a round of applause. Thank you, man. It's great to see young people stepping up into public life. Thanks, man. Good luck to you. You're going to do great, and you're going to make a great public servant for the state of Wisconsin. God bless you. Now, you've got a great congressman here, and I'm going to call him up in a second to offer a few remarks. But if y'all remember, the last time that I was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I made a nice little stroll over to Kamala Harris's plane. Do you remember that? Now, that was pretty fun. And the reason that I did it is, if you remember, at that time, Kamala Harris had been the presumptive nominee for about a month, and she had done 0 media interviews. 0 interviews with the press, 0 questions asked and answered, 0 opportunities for her to take advantage of to actually talk to the American people. And what kind of person wants to be the president of the United States but is too afraid of friendly American media? That is a disgrace. And we should not promote Kamala Harris. We should say to Kamala Harris, you are fired. If you're too afraid of the American media, you can't be the president of the United States. Now, it's funny, though, not a whole lot's changed. You know, Kamala Harris has gone from giving, I think, 0 interviews to maybe 2 interviews. And my favorite thing about Kamala Harris's interviews is I think that we win about 100,000 votes every time she answers a question. Because, you know, the difference, there are all these differences, all these policy differences, all these things that I could point to. But you know the biggest difference, I think, between President Trump's campaign and Kamala Harris's campaign? It's that Kamala Harris speaks to the American people like they're children, and we speak to the American people like they're fellow citizens who deserve our vote and deserve our respect. Because, you know, they'll say, well, Kamala, Vice President Harris, what is your plan to lower the inflation caused by your policies? And she'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. I believe in small business. And then everybody with an ounce of common sense is saying, well, you didn't answer the question. Or, Kamala Harris, your policies led to an increase in energy prices, an increase in housing prices. What are you going to do to change that? Give us the specific idea of what you're going to do. And she'll say, well, when I worked at McDonald's, I loved making hash browns. And all the American people want, I think, from a person who would pretend to lead them is to actually answer some tough questions and stand before the American people and ask for their vote. And that's what she refuses to do. Now, I will say that I sympathize with her a little bit, because if I had Kamala Harris's record, I might run for the American media too. And let's just tick through let's go through the details of the public policies that Kamala Harris has pursued to make us weaker, to make us poorer, and to make our country less safe and less secure. Because this didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen by accident. The open border in this country did not happen through an act of God. It happened through an act of Kamala Harris. What she did is, on day one, she said, we're going to suspend deportations. We're going to stop Donald Trump's remain in Mexico. We're going to encourage the asylum fraud that has opened the American southern border. And on day one, she did exactly what she promised. And now Wisconsin and every other state is dealing with the consequences. On day one, remember, Kamala Harris said they were going to go to war with American energy. They were going to explicitly raise America's energy prices because she wanted us to go green. Now, never mind the fact that a lot of the green energy she wants us to buy is from solar panels manufactured in China. Never mind the fact that the electric vehicles that she wants us to drive are from EVs made in China. She promised higher energy prices, and that's exactly what she delivered. And remember, after the most successful 4 years of American foreign policy, we had peace in Asia, we had peace in Africa, we had peace in the Middle East, we had peace in Europe under the leadership of Donald J. Trump. What Kamala Harris did is that she did a total 180. She promised that she was going to undo the foreign policy of Donald J. Trump, and now we have chaos across the world in a country that is on the brink, I really do believe, of World War III. We are closer in this moment to a nuclear war, to a third world war, than at any time in our country's history, and we have the chaos and incompetence of Kamala Harris to thank for it. I say we get a president who knows what the hell he's doing. I say we get Donald J. Trump back in the Oval Office. Now, before we go much deeper into the record of Kamala Harris, I want to bring up a great Wisconsin representative, a great patriot, and a great human being. Congressman, why don't you come up and say a few words to this great crowd? Derek Van Orden, ladies and gentlemen. God bless him.
Thank you, sir. All right, what'd I tell you? This is why we like J.D. Vance here. He started in some of the meanest circumstances you can possibly imagine in the United States of America. He joined the military. He made something for himself. He's got a great family, and he loves his country. The reason we like Donald J. Trump here is because he has built America, and he will defend us literally with his life. He got shot in the head for us, and he said, fight, fight, fight. When you gentle people leave this place, I want you to look around at God's creation. And I want you to look at these beautiful rolling hills. And I want you to stop your car. And I want you to look at that hill. And it doesn't matter how long you look at that hill, the cavalry is not coming over the hill. Because the cavalry is in this room. So, Mr. Future Vice President, I love having you here. You are always welcome. We will fill you up with cheese curds to the point where you're not going to be able to walk. Give my best, our best to your family and to President Trump, and God bless you, sir. And let's go win something!
Now, you heard Derek tell a little bit about my backstory, and let me just tell you a little bit more, because one of the reasons that I am so proud to stand here is that my story is very much an American story, and I believe that my story is impossible anywhere else but the United States of America. We still have, as much as our leadership is trying to destroy it, we still have the American dream in this country, and this election is about preserving it and building upon it for the next generation. Now, my American dream was not to write a best-selling book. It wasn't to start a business. It wasn't even to run for vice president, as awesome as it is. My American dream was to be a good husband and to be a good father, to give my children the things that I didn't have when I was growing up. Now, it would have been impossible without the great bounty and incredible kindness of this country, from public school teachers who took care of me to the incredible opportunities of the United States Marine Corps, and Semper Fi to all the Marines out there. But it very much would have been impossible without the love and the support of a very, very strong woman, my grandmother, who took care of me when my mom couldn't take care of me. God bless you, ma'am. And I know between the fentanyl problems, the opioid problems, or sometimes just the circumstances of life, we have got, even in this room, some strong grandmas and some strong grandpas. Let's give it up. Thank you all. God bless you. We love you for doing what you do. For taking care of kids you didn't necessarily plan to take care of. We love you for it. We're grateful for it. Look, I don't know that I ever said thanks to my grandmother, at least not when I was a snot-nosed kid. But I wish that she could see this room and this crowd today. This is a great testament to our country and a great testament to what is possible in the United States of America. I shouldn't be here, my friends. I shouldn't be standing up here, but I am, because this is the greatest country in the world. Now, my grandmother, for those of you who haven't read anything about me or heard anything about me or missed my RNC speech, she was a woman of many tensions. She was a woman of very deep and profound Christian faith. My grandmother also loved the F word. And, both of those things were true. And I needed both. I needed the discipline. I also needed the love. I needed the Christian faith, and I also needed to be cussed out from time to time, because I was very often a kid who was not making the right decisions. And thank God that I had my grandmother to put me on the straight and narrow. But because I grew up in a family where money was often tight, and because I grew up in a neighborhood where things weren't always easy, I see the problems of Kamala Harris's economy and Kamala Harris's open border differently, I think, than a lot of leaders in Washington, D.C. Because I remember when my grandmother was negotiating with somebody from Meals on Wheels for a little bit of extra food so that she could share with her grandchildren. And I wonder, for the millions of families across this state and across this country who are struggling to put food on the table, what does your life look like when groceries get 25% more expensive, as they have under the policies of Kamala Harris? And as much as things weren't always easy in my neighborhood, one thing we always had, because we believed in this country, Democrat or Republican, rich or poor, every single child deserves to grow up in a neighborhood with basic public safety. And that is maybe the most dangerous thing that Kamala Harris has done to this country. Because she wants to defund the police, and because she has waged war on law enforcement, and because she has opened up that American southern border, we have taken from every American child what should be their birthright in this country. We have taken public safety away, and it's time to give it back to them, and that's exactly what President Trump is going to do. Because I want to tell you a story, of course, of a person of a family that has been affected by Kamala Harris's open border. And I want to tell you a couple stories, actually, because it drives home how much we have failed. Our leadership has failed this country. Now, if you watched the Republican National Convention a few weeks ago, you probably saw this incredible, beautiful, brave mother who had just lost an incredibly handsome young man, a 14-year-old kid, I believe. And she lost that 14-year-old son of hers because he died of a fentanyl overdose. Now, I saw some trolls, some very mean and sick people on the internet, on social media, talk about how this child died because he made a mistake. He took drugs, and those drugs were laced with fentanyl. And I think, first of all, how disgusting do you have to be to attack a young mother who's talking about her beloved child? But more importantly, don't all of us want to raise our children in communities where they can make childhood mistakes and not have it claim their life? I am the father of a 7-year-old boy, a 4-year-old boy, and a 2-year-old baby girl. And I love them with all my heart, and I know, like every single kid in this country, they are eventually going to do something that really pisses me off. It's just what happens when you're a father. In fact, they do that every single day right now, and they're only 7, 4, and 2. But I want them to grow up in a country where the streets are safe enough where they can make a mistake and learn from it rather than have it take their life. And that is what we need. We got to get back to public safety in this country. Now, I want to talk about another story because it's so close to here in Wisconsin and it drives home that every community is a border state. Every community is a border community because the problems that Kamala Harris has imported through that American southern border have now gone nationwide. I mean, I talked to a local Wisconsin law enforcement officer just a few weeks ago. He said, we're arresting Mexican drug cartel members an hour outside of Milwaukee, and you realize Mexican drug cartels are operating outside of Milwaukee. And we have, of course, the town of Prairie du Chien. And earlier this month, I'm sure I'm not telling most of you something you don't know, earlier this month, that town felt the sting of Harris's open borders. Because an illegal immigrant, a gang member from Venezuela, crossed the American southern border. He went to Minneapolis, was not deported because it's a sanctuary city, thanks Tim Walz. He went to Madison, Wisconsin, and was not deported because it was a sanctuary city. And then he went to this small Wisconsin town and committed sexual assault against a mother and a young child. He should have never been in this country, ladies and gentlemen. And when Donald J. Trump is president, all of them are going home. We're going to deport the criminal migrants in this country. It's just so simple. This is not rocket science. That guy, if you look at his rap sheet, his criminal arrest record, he had every red flag, every siren was going off. Not only should he have not illegally immigrated into our country, but he should have been deported after he was arrested. And he wasn't, thanks to the policies of Kamala Harris. Now, what kind of a person wants to lead this country but pursues policies as vice president that allows a violent criminal illegal alien not just to set up shop in our country, but to not be deported after he commits a violent crime? What kind of a person wants to lead the United States of America but wants to bankrupt Medicare by giving it to illegal aliens and encouraging people to stay in this country? What kind of a person says that she supports law enforcement, but just a few short years ago attacked law enforcement and said that she wanted to defund the police? And what kind of a person says that she stands for working people in this country, but thanks to her policies, the cost of everything from food to housing is unaffordable for the majority of American working families? What kind of a person does that? Her name is Kamala Harris, and we will not let her anywhere near the White House in this country. Now, I think the contrast here, the contrast between President Trump's policies and Kamala Harris's policies, it's really just unbelievable. I mean, Kamala Harris wants to suspend deportations. Donald Trump wants to re-implement deportations. Common sense. Kamala Harris wants to spend trillions of dollars and hundreds of billions of dollars on Chinese-made electric vehicles. Donald Trump wants to manufacture more in the United States of America, build America, buy America, and support American workers in the process. Kamala Harris wants to defund the police. Donald Trump, and I think I speak for every person in this room, we want to back the blue and make it easier for those police officers to keep us safe. Kamala Harris wants to raise the price of energy, which would impoverish millions of Americans. In fact, it already has. Donald Trump wants to drill, baby, drill, and on day one, that's exactly what he's going to do. So the contrast couldn't be clearer, and I think that's probably why Kamala Harris hides from the American media. She knows that if the real Kamala Harris was actually out there, then the majority of the American people would reject her. And that is exactly what we have to do. Just tell the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Tell the truth. Get it out there about Kamala Harris. Get it out there about our great president, Donald Trump. And if we do that, we are going to win Wisconsin, we are going to win the nation, and we're going to take this country back. Now, I'm going to take some questions from reporters, but before I do, let me just leave you with a couple of thoughts. The first is, of course, it's one of my first public appearances since the second assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump. And I'll tell you what was going on. On Sunday afternoon, I was sitting with my 7-year-old, and we were playing video games, because we always play video games whenever Mom leaves the house. And by the way, we've got my lovely wife, Usha, here in the front row. Usha, I love you, honey. One of these days, I'm going to make Usha come up here and speak for about 35 minutes, but I'm going to be in the doghouse when that happens. But we're sitting at home. I don't know exactly what time it was, probably 1:30, 1:45, and my phone rings, and it's President Trump, and I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, man, how you doing? He's like, JD, they tried to do it again. I said, what are you talking about? He said, they just tried to shoot me again. And, of course, my heart skips a beat, and I think immediately, well, sir, are you okay? Right? I mean, you sound okay on the phone. Hopefully, physically, you're not calling me from the hospital, but are you doing okay? And, of course, President Trump, in classic style, said, yeah, I'm doing fine. And I could tell it didn't bother him nearly as much as it bothered me, and I wasn't even there. And then he says, the real problem is that I was on the 6th hole and I was about to make a birdie, and they wouldn't let me finish. And yeah, that's funny, but it hit me that what we need in these troubled times, what we need when we have a war in Europe, a war threatening in Asia, a war threatening in virtually every continent all over the world, what we need is the kind of leader who can take an assassination attempt, get back up, and go back to work for the American people. That is courage under fire, and it's sorely missing at the White House. Because, you never, look, there are disagreements that we're going to have, even in this room, on public policy. There are things that I'm going to say, or things even that President Trump says you may not agree with every single thing. But what you do know with Donald Trump is, first of all, you get exactly what you see. This is not a person who filters himself and hides behind slogans like Kamala Harris. He is exactly who he is, and he's damn proud of it. But the other thing with President Trump is you get somebody who is competent and shows courage under fire. Because every president eventually gets that famous 2 a.m., 3 a.m. phone call. And who do you want answering the phone? Do you want a person who hides from the friendly American media, or do you want a person who takes a bullet to the head and stands up and says, fight, fight, fight? I think I know my answer. So I hope we can all agree that what President Trump showed was not just courage under fire, but the qualities of leadership that are necessary to actually lead this country. And we have an opportunity to put him back in the White House, but only if he makes it 7 weeks to Election Day, because we know that in this environment, unfortunately, it's not out of the question that somebody else might try to take another shot. And I hate to say it, but it's time for us to be honest about it, that the American media, the Democrats, the Kamala Harris campaign, they've got to cut this crap out or they're going to get somebody killed. Now, you hear a lot of talk about overheated political rhetoric. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I promise you that I will do my part to lower the temperature because we don't want anybody to get hurt in our politics, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. But to hear the Democrats today talk about both sides, to hear the Democrats talk about both sides need to tamp down the political rhetoric, ignores one big problem. And that problem is that in the past 2 months, 2 separate people have tried to take Donald Trump's life. Yes, we need to tone down the political rhetoric, but that especially applies to the Democrats. Stop the craziness, stop the violent talk, and let Donald Trump go out there and make his case to the American people. Because I realized something, and, Bobby Kennedy endorsed the president's course a few weeks ago. I've gotten to know Bobby very well. He's a great guy. We're thrilled to have him on the team. Make America healthy again, right? But I was talking about this with Bobby Kennedy. Look, what happened to his dad, whatever your political affiliation, whatever you believed at the time, whether you plan to vote for him or not, it opened up a wound in this country that I believe has still never healed. And what the Democrats have done, not Democratic voters, but Democratic politicians, what these guys have done in the last few years is embrace something that is very dangerous, and that is censorship. Now, I disagree with Kamala Harris. I disagree with about everything that comes out of her mouth, even when I don't understand it. But I will vigorously defend every person's right to speak their mind in this country because we believe in free speech in the Republican Party and in this movement. But think about all the ways that they've tried to censor Donald Trump. Think about the fact that Kamala Harris herself called for him to be booted off social media. Think about the fact that her political allies said recently that he should be eliminated. Think about all of the sham prosecutions. Think about every single thing that they've done to try to silence him and shut him up. And then consider, just yesterday, one of the chief surrogates of Kamala Harris's campaign is Hillary Clinton. And you know what Hillary Clinton said yesterday? She said that misinformation should be met with criminal penalties. That we ought to throw people in jail and silence them if they say something that Hillary Clinton disagrees with. And here's the thing. If you're willing, my friends, if you are willing to throw a person in jail because you disagree with what they say, then you're going to be willing to put a bullet in their head too. So the Democrats, I call on every leader in this country, not just tone down the rhetoric, but tone down the censorship. Let's have a debate with one another. That's what Americans do. Stop trying to silence people you disagree with. And I think if we have that debate, if we have that conversation, I really believe that the American people are going to make Donald J. Trump the next president of the United States. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen easily. It's not going to happen without us working for it and without us fighting for it. So as I understand it, there are over 500 people just in this room. That's a great crowd, by the way, and I'm thrilled to see every single person. But every single person here should try to be a force multiplier for this campaign. Because we all know that if you take 100 people who plan to vote for Donald Trump, by Election Day, 95 of them will have done it. And 5 of them, what are they thinking? Maybe a kid gets sick at school. They got to go pick somebody up. Maybe mom gets sick and they got to go take her to the doctor. Maybe something comes up at work where they're working late and they don't get a chance to go to the voting booth. We have got to get every single one of our friends and family, because unless we elect Donald J. Trump, the open border is going to continue, the high prices are going to continue, the economic stagnation is going to continue, and our country is not going to be safe. So let's do our job. Let's fight for this country. From Wisconsin, we're going to send a message. And that message is, we're going red, the country's going red, Donald J. Trump is our president, and we're going to win in November. God bless you all. Thank you. So now we're going to take a few questions from the media, and then unfortunately I have to hit the road. But what I'd ask is that we start with the local reporters first. We'll take some questions from the local folks, and then we'll go to the national folks if we got time. First question. Love you, ma'am. Thank you. God bless you.
Can you talk to us about why you are prioritizing coming to Western Wisconsin? This is your second time here. Why is this area so important to your campaign?
Ma'am, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear the question. Could you just repeat it and maybe hold the microphone a little bit closer?
Yeah. Can you talk to us about why this area is so important to your campaign? As you said, this is your second time here in Eau Claire.
Well, first of all, I just think it's a beautiful area, and I love spending time here. So I'm going to come back as much as these fine people will have me. Thank you, sir. But look, there's no need to beat around the bush here. Wisconsin is one of the most important states in the country, and this is one of the most important parts of the state of Wisconsin. Because we know that we're going to win a lot of voters here, but only if people actually turn out and show up to vote. I mean, politics, I've learned this. I've been in politics all of 2 years, but this is not rocket science. You do two things in a political campaign. You try to persuade swing voters, and then you try to get out the people that are going to vote for you. You try to make sure they get to the polls. And we're doing both things here today. We're trying to take a message to swing voters that it could be so much better. Our country could be doing so much better so long as we get leadership that's fit to serve this great nation. That's number one. That's the message of swing voters. We could have lower grocery prices. We could have a housing market where young people can afford to buy the American dream of homeownership. We can have a country with a secure southern border. We can have neighborhoods that are safe for our children to walk down. These things are all possible. We just need better leadership. That's our message to everybody, but particularly to people who haven't made up their mind yet. And then our message to everybody else is get out there, make sure you vote, and get your friends and family to vote too. And those two messages, I think, are why we're here in Eau Claire, and it's why we're going to win the state of Wisconsin. Next question.
Hi, Senator. My name is Allison Fergit. I'm a reporter at WKBT News 8 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So access to childcare is an ongoing issue in Western Wisconsin, and you've previously said grandparents and other family members should help out more. Unfortunately, that is not a reality for every Wisconsin family. So what policies do you and former President Trump support that would make childcare more accessible for our hardworking Wisconsin families?
Yeah. So, one, I didn't say that grandparents should help out more. I said that our government should make it easier for grandparents to help out more. And that's a very important distinction, because if you look at the public policies we have in this country, we spend a lot of money on child care, and rightfully so. There are a lot of families out there who are struggling with child care, and we want to make it easier for them. Look, the way I think about it is we want options, right? If you're a young mom or you're a young dad, you want to spend more time at home with the kids, we should make that easier. If you want to go back to the work after a couple years, we should make that easier. If you want to go to work right away, we just want people to be able to fulfill their dreams as they see them. That's what's great about this wonderful country of ours, is everybody's got something a little bit different. But here's the issue right now. Right now, government policy prioritizes one model of business-provided daycare. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, with that one model. But we ought to be promoting other access options for a lot of families. Like, for example, maybe you want to send your kid to a daycare, but maybe you want to send your kid to a church daycare. Or maybe you'd like to be able to get together with other families in your neighborhood to try to do something where each of you is taking care of the kids in your own way. Maybe one person takes one day off, one person takes Tuesday off, one person takes Wednesday off. Maybe that means that grandparents would actually like to be able to help out a little bit more, but they can't financially because they can't afford to take off from their own jobs to help out with mom and dad and the kids. There are so many different options out there, but what does the government subsidize? Just one. We only support one model in this country. And what President Trump and I believe is that we ought to support every model. We ought to let people make their own choices in family care, not try to force one government-size-fits-all approach on everybody. But look, we have got to get this right. And, we talk a lot about inflation. We talk a lot about groceries being more expensive. We talk a lot about housing being more expensive. But I meet families every single day out on the campaign trail. And some of the stories they're telling me, you get two kids in daycare paying $25,000 a year in child care. I actually heard from somebody just yesterday who has two children in daycare and actually is losing money by going to work because of how expensive daycare is. And again, we got to just give people options. We got to give people choice. And You know, there are two programs here, the Child Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant where the federal government sends a lot of money to the states. We ought to be using that money in a way that benefits all families, not just the one-size-government-fits-all method. And that'll promote options in child care, that'll make our kids happier, that'll make our moms and dads happier too. Thank you.
James Kelly with Civic Media. Right now in the Chippewa Valley, we're facing a healthcare crisis with the abrupt closure of 2 hospitals earlier this year, as well as a number of clinics. I'm glad you mentioned providing actual concrete answers to questions. What concrete plans would your administration have to protect rural healthcare access?
So there are a couple things here. So first of all, this goes back to the immigration issue. And why does it go back to the immigration issue? Because a lot of our rural hospitals are bearing the burden of providing health care to millions of people who shouldn't be in this country to begin with. And so those hospitals go bankrupt, and then a lot of American citizens can't afford health care. Now, you might not think that rural health care access is an immigration issue. I guarantee it is an immigration issue because we're bankrupting a lot of hospitals by forcing these hospitals to provide care for people who don't have the legal right to be in our country. We've got to stop that. Kick these illegal aliens out, focus on American citizens, and we will do a lot to make the business of rural health care much more affordable. Now, there are a couple of other things that we can do, too. So one option, and this is something that President Trump is very proud of, and rightfully so, he provided a lot of choice to veterans in health care because, look, a lot of folks in rural areas, they live maybe 15 minutes away from a viable clinic, but 2 hours away, an hour-and-a-half drive from a VA medical center. So why does it make sense to make a Vietnam veteran drive 3 hours or 4 hours round trip to get health care when it would actually be cheaper for the government and also better access for that veteran to get it 15 minutes away from his home? So give more choice to people, and then that veteran's going to a local service provider, which again makes that business model a little bit more viable. And here's the problem. The reason why all these rural health systems are going out of business is we're sending everybody to get health care services 2 hours away. And if there aren't enough patients for those rural health systems, then they are going to go out of business. So we've got to promote access. We've got to make it easier for folks to get to those hospital systems in the first place. I just gave you a couple answers: cut down on illegal immigration, promote veteran choice. But there's a lot more that we could do beyond that. And I think when Donald Trump and I are president, we will.
Again, I'm Kim with WEAU. I didn't see that before, my bad. The Senate today blocked an IVF bill. Do you have any comments you want to share about that, especially considering last time Trump was in western Wisconsin, he shared his support for that?
So I think we have to be careful here because the Senate did not block an IVF bill. The Senate blocked a ridiculous show vote bill that had no chance of passing. And I think it highlights one of the problems that I really have with Kamala Harris's entire approach to government. We have to remember, Kamala Harris is the Vice President of the United States. Chuck Schumer, her ally in Congress, is the Senate Majority Leader. You have in the U.S. Senate right now probably 100 votes or maybe 99 votes that support fertility treatment and want to make it easier for young women to get access to fertility treatment. Now, did Kamala Harris and Chuck Schumer come together and produce a bipartisan bill? No. They shoved through a vote today knowing it would have no chance of passing because they wanted to be able to say, we support IVF and the other guys don't. But that's not a real support of IVF. That's political showmanship, and I think Wisconsinites are sick of it. Let's do real legislation and real policy in this country, not these ridiculous show votes. By the way, I take this a little personally because the most significant bipartisan legislation to get out of any committee the last 2 years in the United States Senate was a railway safety bill that I authored with some of my Democratic colleagues, okay? And the basic idea of this bill, by the way, is trains shouldn't be able to crash into rural communities or urban communities without any consequences. So we want to make those train companies operate a little bit more safely. That bill right now could pass the United States Senate. Chuck Schumer's not bringing it up because he's not interested in making policy. And Kamala Harris, she's not interested in making policy. They're interested in ridiculous show votes so that they can win elections. The American people deserve more. They deserve competent government. They deserve people who do things, who don't just talk about doing stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. This is Veronica from CNN. If I could ask a follow-up question on the IVF bill. How can voters trust lawmakers' sincerity to protect IVF if both parties keep blocking every proposal from moving forward? Thank you.
Well, look, I just answered that question. And what I said is it is not an IVF bill. It's a Democrat show bill to say that they support IVF when if they really supported access to fertility treatments, they would pass legislation that did exactly that, and they would get every single person in the United States Senate to vote for it. It's really not that complicated here. The problem that Republicans have, just substantively, the problem Republicans have with the bill that they're pushing in the Senate right now is that it would be a huge infringement on religious liberty. I want to protect people's access to fertility treatments. I'd also like to protect Christian hospitals' right to conduct their hospitals as they see fit. And you can do both of those things. We're a big enough country. And again, I think it highlights something where Kamala Harris's record is so different from her actual, what she says on the campaign trail. Her record's totally different from what she talks about. Because look, this is a person who says that she wants to turn the page on the culture wars. Well, we have a piece of legislation that could get 99 or 100 senators right now that would protect fertility treatments and promote access to fertility treatments. She's not working on that. She's not working on that legislation. She would rather use fertility treatments as a weapon politically instead of get something done for the American people. Donald Trump and I think totally differently about government. Let's get things done for the American people, even if you have to take political costs to do it. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Senator Vance. Katrina Kaufman, CBS News. So a woman who was behind an early Facebook post about the Haitian migrants in Springfield has now apologized for spreading false rumors. You say that you have a responsibility to share what your constituents tell you, but don't you also have a responsibility to fact-check them first?
Well, I think the media has a responsibility to fact-check the residents of Springfield, not lie about them. I mean, And look, I think this is really interesting. I actually think this is really interesting, and I've learned a lot about the American media over the last week, and none of it's good, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. But look, what I've learned here is, first of all, I've got residents of Springfield who are coming to me with a dozen different problems. They've been talking about it for months or in some cases years. The American media totally ignored it until they showed up to fact-check what some people were saying about pets. Well, why weren't you in Springfield, Ohio 6 months ago talking about the housing crisis? Why wasn't the American media in Springfield, Ohio 6 months ago talking about skyrocketing rates of accidents, of car insurance? Why weren't they talking about the rural health care problem? Why weren't they talking about the rural health care problem because the hospitals have been overwhelmed? Why aren't they talking about the fact that in a small town, you've got a school district that now has 1,000, that's not an exaggeration, 1,000 children who don't even speak English? How are the American children supposed to get a good education when everybody's focused on the other kids, who, by the way, are innocent children, but that doesn't mean they should be at 1,000 in every single American school? So here's the issue. So there's one story out there from multiple people, by the way. Multiple people have come to my office, have said on video, they talk about the pet story. And that's all the American media wants to talk about. And of course, the American media goes into Springfield, dives in, harasses everybody who dares to complain about the condition of the town. That is not journalism, and that's not seeking the truth. That is bullying on an industrial scale. And I think the media ought to be ashamed of itself. And let me just highlight this in a very real way. Yesterday, we got a call from a constituent in my office, a person who's very worried about a lot of the problems in Springfield and has direct eyewitness evidence bearing on a lot of them. And you know what this person said? Please do not share my name with anybody, because the minute somebody in Springfield speaks out, a dozen camera crews show up on their front door trying to destroy their lives. That is disgraceful. That is a disgraceful way to think about journalism and seeking of truth in this country. You ought to go in and listen to everybody. By all means, listen to local officials. By all means, listen to the people who say everything's fine, but listen to the people who say this town has been overwhelmed by 20,000 migrants and they can't take it anymore. And by the way, that story of a small town overwhelmed by Kamala Harris's open border, it is coming to every state in this union under Kamala Harris's policies. We've got to stop it.
Hi, Senator. Taylor Popolars with Spectrum News. Thank you for the time. Last night, you spoke at the Faith and Freedom Coalition dinner in Georgia. The coalition says on its website that it, quote, supports public policies that strengthen traditional marriage. As voters are learning about you as a vice presidential nominee, they'll learn that you were baptized as Catholic in 2019 and that you speak at events like this. Can you clarify where you stand on same-sex marriage?
Look, Taylor, I think this issue has long sailed in this country. The Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage is the law of the land, and nobody is trying to change that. That is not an issue that we're focused on at all in this country. And I mean, not at all. Whether you're pro or anti, most people recognize that ship has sailed. And certainly President Trump, you know what we're focused on? We're focused on making groceries more affordable for American citizens. We're focused on making housing more affordable. We're focused on bringing peace back to the world. We're focused on solving the problems that a national government ought to solve. Whether you're gay or straight, you are welcome in Donald Trump's Republican Party, so long as you believe in common sense. So long as you believe in common sense, you're welcome in Donald Trump's Republican Party. And I got to say, we should ask ourselves, how is it that Donald Trump managed to assemble a coalition that is Brian Kemp, Nikki Haley, Donald Trump, Robert F. Kennedy, and Tulsi Gabbard? What could that possibly mean other than the Democrats have gone loony and we're the party of common sense?
Hi, Senator. Thank you for taking our questions. My questions for you is, do you plan to visit Springfield at any time soon? And Governor DeWine said at a press conference today that you guys haven't spoken since the events in Springfield have played out. Do you plan to reach out to him?
Well, first of all, our office has been in constant contact with the governor's office. In Springfield, Ohio, I've probably been to Springfield 100 times in my life. It's a town about 45 minutes away from where I grew up. It's got like a very famous ice cream place, and if you know anything about me, I love my ice cream. And so I've taken my kids there any number of times. We probably have some pretty good ice cream in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I imagine, right? But I do want to go to Springfield, and I do want to talk with folks on the ground. We also have to be honest that they've got a local law enforcement agencies that are stressed out by what's going on, including the influx of 20,000 migrants. Is it the best interest of Springfield for me to show up with a 40-person strong Secret Service detail right now? Maybe not. So we're going to do what's in the best interest of the citizens of Springfield, but we're going to keep in contact. Every single day we are hearing from multiple people on the ground in Springfield trying to understand what's going on and trying to help where we can, and that's what we're going to keep on doing. And certainly we're going to visit, but we're going to visit in a way that's consistent with the best interest of the residents of the town. And finally, let me just remind, just while we're on the topic of Springfield, we have to remember here, Springfield is a microcosm of what Kamala Harris's open border is going to do in every town and every city in this country. Now, the promise, these guys actually say the promise is that if we bring in millions and millions of illegal low-wage migrants, we are going to make America more prosperous. That's what they say. Well, check the tape on what's going on in Springfield. You get people getting evicted, thrown out of their houses to make way for migrants who are on housing benefits, paid for by your tax dollars, evicting American citizens. We've got an overwhelmed hospital system, an overwhelmed school system. We've got residents, black and white, by the way, who talk about not even driving on certain sides of town because the car accident rates are so bad. And, of course, that's jacked up car insurance rates for all the people in this town. It is an unbelievable tragedy, totally unforced, invited by Kamala Harris's open border, and it must stop.
Hi, Senator. Caitlin Corelli with the Daily.
And we'll do two more questions, and then I'll leave you with some final thoughts, and we'll hit the road. Ma'am.
Okay, Senator, thank you. Caitlin Corelli with the Daily Mail. Vice President Harris said again today that the, quote, hateful rhetoric over migrants eating pets is what has caused the bomb threats in Springfield. Can you just respond to her latest, please, on this?
I think that's basically my response. Just put that in the paper, loud boos and 2 thumbs down. That's my response to what Kamala Harris said. Look, here's, you guys are going to get me all fired up again. I was ready to leave. Here's the thing about this. It's what happened in Springfield is not just disgraceful because it's made people's lives worse. What's happened is disgraceful because the way that Kamala Harris and her media allies have tried to silence the people from daring to complain that life has gotten worse in their own community, in their own country. Think about this. The argument was that because Donald Trump and I and the many, many hundreds of residents of Springfield that we've talked to in the last few weeks, because we dared to point out that life has gotten worse for those citizens, we are somehow to blame because a psychopath called in a bomb threat. Now, that story actually got a little bit more complicated in the last 24 hours because you know who was calling in the bomb threats? People who were living in foreign countries. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, came out and said the bomb threats are coming from foreign countries. And he actually said primarily one country. I'd like to know what country that is. But look, the media is laundering literal foreign disinformation in an effort to silence the citizens of their own country from participating in an American election. It is despicable, and it has to stop. We cannot... Think about it. Let's just say, God forbid, these bomb threats were being called in from America and not from a foreign country. It actually doesn't change it that much because, look, bomb threats are despicable. We condemn violence, and, of course, we condemn threats of violence. But we do not believe in a heckler's veto in this country. The fact that some psychopath is calling in bomb threats, does that mean the residents of Springfield are not allowed to be annoyed about housing prices? Does that mean that they're not allowed to complain about 20,000 migrants being dropped on their doorstep? Does that mean a mom is not allowed to be frustrated that hospital wait times have gotten so long that her kids can't get treatment for basic medical conditions? That is a ridiculous principle. And the principle, actually, if you think about it, it's all about censorship. It's moral blackmail in the favor of censorship, and I reject it, whoever's doing it.
Hi, Senator. Jake Traylor, NBC News. Given your remarks on Sunday that you don't speak on behalf of former President Trump before you've spoken to him about an issue, I know you said the likelihood of a federal abortion ban coming to a president's desk is very unlikely, but given the topicality of the issue of abortion, don't you think that's something running mates should have discussed before?
Well, we have discussed the topic of abortion many, many times. What we hadn't discussed is a ridiculous hypothetical of a federal abortion ban coming to his desk. Because, look, President Trump, and to be fair, I think he's right about this, we shouldn't take the media bait. We shouldn't discuss things that aren't actually going to become law in this country. So when he says, I think that abortion should be a state's issue, and he says that I'm not backing a national abortion ban, then that should be enough to end the discussion. You take him for his word or you don't, but the idea... It's you know, you could ask a million different pieces of legislation. Would you veto that piece of legislation? And I wouldn't have talked to Donald Trump about it unless he actually supports the substance of those legislation. So let's not engage in stupid hypotheticals. Let's not engage in something that's never actually going to happen. The president thinks abortion should be decided by the states. He's been as consistent as he could about that issue. Thank you. You know, Mike, I'll give you a question just to be nice. This will be our last question. And this is the New York Times, so don't hold it against them.
The paper of record, New York Times. I appreciate you inviting the tough questions and your crowd welcoming the tough questions here. The question is
I'm sure you're going to ask me an easy one, though, Mike, just to make up for it.
The question is about Springfield, not about the situation, but the style, which I think is something new that we're seeing on the campaign trail. You've said, regardless of what the exact precise facts are here, it's worth it to make the larger point of a town overrun by immigration.
Well, I'd say, Mike, you ask your question,
Yes,
but no, I didn't say regardless of the precise facts. I said you have to listen to what people are saying. Right? The media has tried to say now for days that I've made up this story. I haven't made up anything. I've just listened to people who are telling me these things. And when I said, and the media always does this, they're very dishonest, when I say that I created a story, I'm talking about the media story. By focusing the press's attention on what's going on in Springfield, I'm not making anything up. I'm just telling you what my own constituents are telling me. But ask your question.
That's the point. Your willingness to shine a light on issues you see as important.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if you can describe, if you know where your line is on that. Something, at what point, what's something you're willing not to say in order to make a point that is important to you?
Well, I mean, come on.
If you know.
Mike. Well,
it was
Mike,
a question for him,
Mike,
not the crowd.
What I wouldn't say is that the New York Times is a respectable paper. That's one thing I wouldn't be willing to say. But all kidding aside, if one person had called me and said, I'm seeing this in Springfield, we maybe let that pass. When 4, 5, 6, 7 people are telling me they see something in Springfield, and on top of it, that there are certain people who refuse to listen to them, who refuse to take their concerns seriously, that's when it's my job as a United States Senator to listen to my constituents. That's really, it's very simple. Now, I mean, look, there's a lot of crazy stuff you read about. I mean, one of these things, I don't know if you saw this story from a couple of years ago that, like, the Defense Department had declassified the UFO stuff. Did you see that? That was a crazy story. I don't talk about that because I have no idea what's going on. So my standard for whether I talk about something, Mike, is whether enough people that I trust bring it to me, at least to the point where I feel like I've got to investigate it myself, not just trust the media to do their job, because a lot of times they don't. So, by the way, to all the journalists there, if you do know anything about the UFO story, please tell us, because we're very, very fascinated by it. But look, let me leave you with just one final thought here. So, one thing that people ask me, and it's very sweet, it's very kind of them to ask me, but they always ask me how we're doing. They ask me, Anusha, how we're doing. And I'll say that in a lot of ways, running for the vice presidency, I know why they ask, right? Because they assume that running for the vice presidency is hard. But honestly, it's been the great professional honor of my life to get up here and ask you to be your next vice president of the United States. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't ever complain about it. And Thank you. But the thought I wanted to leave you with is a fellow Waterboy fan over here. But look, I know why people ask, but let me just say this. First of all, it's a lot easier to run for vice president than it is to run for Senate. You know, Ohio's not that different from Wisconsin in a lot of ways. And running for Senate in the state of Ohio, I rode around in the back of one of my guys' used Subarus, and now I ride around in a 737, right? That's a pretty nice upgrade. Not bad. But what I wish that I could do is give every single one of you the perspective that I've gotten over this beautiful country over the last seven weeks. Because you fly into places like Eau Claire, and we were in Grand Rapids earlier today, and trust me, as a Buckeye, it's hard to compliment the state of Michigan, but it is a beautiful state. It really is one of the most beautiful states in the union. But you go to Arizona and you see these beautiful, beautiful deserts and natural landmarks. You go into Nevada, You go into Pennsylvania, the mountains of central Pennsylvania, and every single day, I cannot help but think, my God, this is a beautiful, beautiful country. It really is. And I think that one thing that we ought to do and one thing we have to do over the next 7 weeks is remind the American people that, yes, this is a beautiful country. We've got the best workers. We've got the best cultural and historical traditions. We have got every single bounty that God could possibly give a nation, including natural resources that the Chinese and the Russians, they would love to have. The only thing that's broken about this country is the failed leadership of Kamala Harris. Let's send her back to San Francisco and give the country a president it deserves. God bless you all. Thank you for having me.